welcome to our online summit. My name is Mary Ann Kannengieser, and I'm very happy to have Wendy Howard here today, who is quite a famous permaculture person in Portugal. Yes, I was told so by Roger. And
how would he know?
Wendy, I'm so happy that you're here today and that you take the time to speak to us. And I would like you to introduce yourself to our listeners. Is this possible?
Oh, I think it might be. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be invited to be here. I'm originally British, as might be obvious from the way I'm speaking. I came from Scotland to Portugal about 10 years ago to set up a permaculture project because that's the way my life was leading me. I felt I had to live in integrity. I had to walk the talk, and it's something that I had been thinking about for so long, and rather than going away, the pressure just got greater and greater and greater and greater. And even though I certainly wasn't the youngest at that point, if I didn't do it then, I would never do it, I felt. So we made the jump, myself and my children. And I've been working that way ever since. Prior to that, I worked in homeopathy for 10 years. I had a children's clinic in Edinburgh. Before that, I worked as a graphic designer. Well, I did that concurrently. Graphic and web designer. I'd worked in financial services. I trained in biology and ecology. So quite an eclectic life story and collection of skills gathered over the years. And now putting it into practice in Portugal and learning every day still. I wouldn't call myself any sort of expert. I muddle through, I think, like the rest of us do.
But you have to take a start some way. And what you definitely did, permaculture, as far as I did learn it, always says, don't go for one resource only. And your life demonstrates you started with a lot of resources of jobs and education.
Yes, true. Although it wasn't a conscious thing at all. I fell into everything I did more or less by accident. So yeah, it was just a case of muddling through life and picking up things along the way.
How did you first meet permaculture and the ideas?
That's a difficult one, actually, because most people are able to recognize the moment, because quite often it was a light bulb moment for them to realize that there was this whole other way of looking at things. But I'd studied homeopathy, which in many ways comes from that same holistic perspective. So when I stumbled across it at some point during the 1990s, it was the kind of just, oh, well, yeah, of course. And I just kind of went from there. So I don't actually ever remember the moment when I first came across it, because it just naturally appended itself onto what I was already learning about.
So the real question is, how did you meet homeopathy?
Oh, well, that was through a long-standing friend of mine in Edinburgh. And well, I'd just come back from working in the States for a couple of years, 3 years, and reconnecting with all my friends back in Edinburgh. And Diane was studying homeopathy. Well, she was doing more than that. She was talking of, she was at the time. She was studying homeopathy. And I mean, from my scientific background, I was absolutely intrigued. I knew her to be a thorough and sensible person, not the sort of person who would go for any old thing. So I thought, okay, well, I'd like to give it a chance. And it was a long time before I was able to do that. I don't get ill very often. Mm-hmm. But I came down with a case of cystitis. So I thought, okay, I'll give Diane a chance, because I know if I have to, I can knock this on the head with antibiotics. It's not a problem. So I went to see her. And the first remedy she prescribed me did absolutely nothing. So I went back to give her another chance. And the second she prescribed me, literally took it away overnight, and it never came back ever again.
Wow.
So that impressed me. That super impressed me, because, you know, as a vet's daughter, I knew how long antibiotics take to build up an effect. And I was anticipating at least a week before they would deal with the condition. And it went overnight. So when she started up a college in Edinburgh, an offshoot of a very well-known and respected London college at the time, I thought, okay, I want to see if I can study this. And at the same time, at that particular point in time, I was on my own with my eldest daughter. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I thought, okay, if I don't push the boat out and see what happens, I'll never know. So I got in touch with various people who I thought could maybe make it possible. Everything fell into place. So I studied for 4 years. And during that time, the college got taken over by business people who proceeded to drive a monster truck through everything good about it. And all the lecturers in Edinburgh were saying, we're leaving. We can't work with these people. They're not listening. They're not paying any attention to the good stuff. They just have their own ideas. We're leaving. And we were all obviously at that stage quite upset about that. So they said, well, you can form your own cooperative college and we'll teach you. And we'll teach you how to write the curriculum and everything else. So a lot of us, most of us went, yeah, we'll go for it. So we, as is the way of these things, discovered we had all the skills necessary within the group from their previous lives. You know, I ended up being the treasurer because of my financial services experience. There was a lawyer, you know, we had it all. And it was an amazing time, really fertile time. So fertile, in fact, that lots of us had babies. I had 2 in that period of time. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I'm still in touch with colleagues and friends from those days.
So you just took over responsibility, self-responsibility.
We set up a completely new thing.
And formed a team, did collaborate, and that way you could make that crisis.
Yes.
And
yes.
really learn
homeopathy.
Great.
It was a phenomenal lesson in self-organization, which of course is the way nature organizes, and how efficient it is, particularly compared to, you know, all the structures that we set up, the rigid ways, the hierarchical structures and the ways of working in this society. Desperately inefficient, very inflexible, you know, unable to respond quickly to change. Self-organization wins every time. I mean, it may appear chaotic, but within that chaos, there is enormous efficiency. Yeah. And then that's something I discovered with my first daughter's education. I had ended up having to take her out of school, so I investigated home education. And then as soon as I started to think about it in depth, then it became obvious, you know, this is the way to learn. This is the way we're designed to learn, chaotically, piecemeal, as it comes to us, you know.
So in forming that college as a team yourself, in fact, there you met permaculture principles, because you did it that absolutely. Way.
Yes, yes. And I mean, you meet permaculture principles all the time, of course, because anything that adequately models the underlying patterns and processes of life is powerful, and it's visible on every level. It's this whole idea, you know, the Hermetic idea of as above, so below. And I think we see that with this virus as well, that it's you can look at it on many different levels of existence, of reality, and interpret its action analogically as much as literally. Not that we can see what's going on literally anyway, because there's so much confusion, but it's giving us a message. It's pointing us in a direction. It's concentrating our minds on places we need to be looking, desperately need to be looking, as a society, as a culture.
When I look at the virus, the first thing I see is when I see the virus as an answer to humanity, the first thing I see is people, how confused you are.
Yeah.
It's the first symptom I would see. It's total confusion. Total.
Yes.
No point where we are, where to go, where to be, how to act.
Exactly.
Total confusion.
Yeah. It's chimerical, it's ephemeral, it's you know, it's liminal, it's on that border between existence and non-existence, and it's constantly shifting and changing, and no one can grasp it, not even the experts. You know, every morning I read this new theory about how it acts within the body, and it's completely at odds with the one that came out yesterday and the day before, and nobody knows. Nobody knows.
It's total confusion, and of course, confusion creates anxiety and fear.
Yes.
And anxiety and fear create overreactions in control. And this is what we are experiencing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the conspiracy theories are coming out of every hole in the woodwork. I mean, not that I think all of them have no foundation. You know, there's rarely smoke without fire. There are those who will opportunistically take advantage of situations like this, and I think that very, very probably there are. But to me, the lack of certainty, the ungraspability of what this virus is and how it's acting and how it's spreading, and whether it's already been here or not, because now with the serological tests, they're finding antibodies in 50 to 85 times more people than they anticipated. So what's that all about, you know?
I think this is what any vet would have said.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we know that kind of virus anyway, since ages.
Yes, yes. You know, it's a common cold family of viruses. Exactly. For which, of course, there's no vaccine because they're so constantly changing. And all that says to me is we're looking in the wrong place for the truth. You know, we're trying to find it in the mess of detail. So we can't see the organizing principles. We need to come above that and start to see, in analogical terms, if you like, what this message is all about. What this action, this event is all about. And very definitely for me, you know, it's the organism of the earth going, stop. You guys have to stop. And it doesn't matter whether the lockdown is justified in epidemiological terms at all. The fact is that it's there because we had to stop. And I think that's possibly the area we need to look at more, rather than going, oh, but this is just like the flu, or, you know, we're not going to find it at that level of detail.
If we would look at what the stop made already, then we could see you guys pollute the earth. Just see. And stop that.
Yes. And in terms of its action on us, you know, what's it doing? It's stopping us from breathing. What are we doing to the earth? We're stopping it from breathing. Yeah. And where is that leading in a worst case scenario? Total organ failure. What are we doing to the earth? Risking collapsing all of its interconnected feedback loops. You know, as above, so below. To me, it's kind of obvious, but then, of course, you tend to get that perspective from looking at homeopathy and seeing symptoms in analogical terms as much as in literal terms, in order to bring the threads together and to see the common themes.
So when we look at it now, it tells us you are confused. You get anxious because you are confused. You try to control, but you can't do it. You just can't do it because you don't know how to do it.
Yes.
And this is more and more.
And more, I think it's also saying, you're really stupid. You're actually stupid and incompetent. You know, we've created these systems where we think we're so clever, we think we know everything. No, we don't. and this is revealing to us, I think, very clearly, our governments are making the most horrendous decisions. They really have no idea. They're children playing at being government. And this is revealing it, I think, very, very clearly. And rather than suspecting some hidden agenda and plot, if you look at them and go, they're just stupid, they don't know what they're doing, then that also becomes quite clear. And I think at the time we all went, hey, we haven't a clue. We really haven't a clue whether this whole construct, this mental construct we've made about our existence, whether it's true or not. The map is not the territory. And our map is falling apart.
Yes. So we could say the virus teaches us you don't really know anything.
Yeah.
It teaches us, look on how violent you are.
Yes.
And it teaches us, if you don't make a shift now, you are going to collapse.
Yes, absolutely.
And die as a society.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think in terms of the percentage of the population that it's affecting, it's still saying, okay, the majority are not affected. We have time, we have room to come back, but it's getting more urgent. It's getting more urgent. The warnings are getting more strident. I mean, we've had warnings for the last several decades in the rise of cancer in our society, because what's that saying to us? We're behaving like cancer cells in the body of the earth. The mentality of our corporations is that of a cancerous tumor. Grow, 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 with no reason other than growth itself.
I just wanted to remind you of the pictures Sheldrake made, looking at the cities from way above, and he demonstrated that a city from way above, from a plane, just looks like an histological cut through a tumor. So what we are doing to the earth by building cities is making tumors.
Yes, absolutely.
I was so intrigued when I saw that, and I did rethink and quit the city then.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I've never been a great one for cities anyway. I didn't grow up in one. I spent 9 years in London when I went to university, wondering what was wrong with my life before I realized it was London. They're very unnatural places.
For me, that's been Munich.
Yeah. Yes, and what we need is hands back on the land. So to me, if the economy collapses and they don't succeed in rescuing it this time because there's no more public money left to rescue people with, people have got to get back to the land. And if this means that we're all able to return and start taking care of a little patch of earth, then we have possibilities. The earth needs care, and no better care is given than individual humans with their own little patch, which they love and they care for and they nurture. We can't do it on a big scale. The minute you start trying to scale it up on any significant basis, then you lose the knowledge of the small places. Context is absolutely everything, and how we restore every little bit of the ecosystem has to pay attention to the unique context of every little part of the land. And if our interventions get too great, then we don't give nature a big enough hand in what we're doing, then it'll fail. And we have this idea, always of being bigger than we are and of trying to control, but assisted natural regeneration has really got to be the way forward, I think. Because nature will do it if we make the conditions. And a lot of that is to do with repairing soils. Soil is just so important. I very soon realized, once I started working here, that all I really had to do was take care of the soil, and everything else would take care of itself. I didn't have to worry about all of that. It was very much a case of looking at the soil, of restoring the organic matter, restoring the life, increasing the water retention capability after years and years of cultivation and neglect. And then everything else would start falling into place. And so it is, 10 years later. And it can be done in quite short periods of time. 10, 20 years, we can do a lot, which is nothing on the geological scale of things at all.
So if we would shift in our mind and go back to little cells, and everybody would care about a bit of land, a bit of earth, and just restore that, looking on the principles of permaculture, and instead of controlling land, communicate with the plants and the earth and the soil, and get into some kind of homeostatic interaction.
Yes.
Balancing, thinking in circles instead of linear thinking.
Yes.
Then we would have a chance to restore our planet on a quite good scale of the next 20 years. 20 to 30 years.
Yes. Because if you think about it, really, the way we got into this mess is lots of cumulative small actions. And the whole... We've been wrong with climate change for the last goodness knows how many years in focusing solely on greenhouse gases. That's just a very small part of the equation. The underlying problem is ecosystem degradation. We're removing the ability of the planet to regulate itself by scraping its surface bare, taking all the forests, putting monocultures everywhere, destroying soils, mining, polluting. I mean, it's insane. Truly insane.
Yeah, it's truly insane. I spoke to one person. I don't know whether you know her. It's Bilbo Calves. It's a French artist, film cutter, and political activist. And she said that all the problems would skip if we would just be able to skip money and the idea of possession.
Yes. Money is just energy tokens. It's a means of exchange, and it's the most efficient one we've invented, because when you barter, the deal is predicated on you each wanting what the other's got, whereas money gives us the ability to find what we need wherever we need it. It's a very efficient means of exchange, and I don't think we can better it, but it's how it's used. It's much the same with looking at cattle. Cattle are not destroying the planet. It's the way we manage them. We're not managing them as nature would manage them. They can be managed regeneratively, or they can be managed wholly destructively. And we're taking the latter route. And it's destructive to ourselves, destructive to the cattle. It's horrendous. But cattle evolved with the grassland ecosystems, or at least ruminants evolved with the grassland ecosystems, and the two are interdependent. You can't separate them. So to restore soil fertility to vast tracts of land, and to restore the ability of the soil to hold water, we need those animals. But it's all in the how. It's all in the how, not the cows, the slogan goes. In every way, we tend to focus on ultimates. We see things, we don't see processes. And I know that the physicist David Bohm was really focused on this for a long time, because he realized that indigenous societies, their languages were much more process-oriented. They didn't really recognize thingness. And in a sense, religious traditions like Buddhism don't recognize it either. It's contingent, it's relative, it's a temporary coalescence of a process. It's not a thing that's separate and distinct. And the problem with English, and I don't know German well, I don't speak it, but I think, is it similar? I don't know. But we are very, very focused on thingness, on nouns, and not what connects them.
It's in the linguistic sense, this is true. because they are German and the English language, they have the same language they come from.
Yes, yes.
This
yes.
Indo-German roots. So it's quite the same. We go back to Sanskrit in effect. And I don't know enough about Sanskrit to really talk about it. But I can tell you another thing. I nearly died when I was 35. I've been over to the other side, and the first thing I learned over there, because I got a lot of teachings over there, was look at the things as a process, not a moment in time and space. That was one of the first things I learned. And I was told that whenever you see a human being, don't look at it as a moment in time and space. Look at it as a process, and you will see the Buddha within.
Yes. Yes, for sure, for sure. Our whole perspective is what needs to shift. And in many ways, we can't regenerate the earth until we make that quantum leap. And so in many ways, this period of isolation, it's not just telling us stop what you're doing, but stop, breathe, go inside and start to realize that the way we're seeing things is part of the insanity. Part of the insanity.
This is what Rajan Sankaran said when I talked to him. It's the time to look within and to really find the purpose of your life, and then go for it and dig deeper.
Yeah. Yes. So, well, I mean, it's something I've followed always. That's how none of the developments of my life have been planned. I just do what I'm told. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a cell in the body of the earth. And I don't know what I'm meant to be doing, but I know that if I listen to that system intelligence, then I'll know what to do. And it's simple, because then there's no angst, there's no worry, there's responsibility for my individual actions, for sure, but I don't have to figure everything out.
No.
I don't have to think of the big plans. I just need to do what I'm told.
This is what you met when you founded your homeopathic college altogether, that if you're on the right track, it just falls together. You just meet serendipity. Absolutely. One way or the other.
Yes.
Just all comes together.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. When I was nearly finishing my veterinary studies, I got a cystitis. Pyelonephritis, and finally kidney inflammation, and nobody could help me. I went to the best professors. In the end, they said, we can't help you. Either you cure yourself or you die.
Whoa.
I was 28 then. And this 7-year intervals in my life are very important all times.
Yeah. That's Saturn, isn't it? If you're into astrology.
Yeah. And that time I met an assistant of that professor who told me that I might have to die. And he said, well, there's homeopathy. Just give it a try. Give it a try. Go to some good homeopath and give it a try. So I went to a homeopath. I smiled at those free globules I did get. I couldn't understand why I needed to answer 2 hours of questions.
Yes.
Just couldn't understand. But the day after, I dreamt of all the major insults I had in my life. 3 days after, I felt a lot better. 4 weeks after, I went back to that man and asked him to tell me about homeopathy. And he just looked at me and did send me to a course. This was my first course of homeopathy, and then I proceeded. And later in my life, I met a lady who did permaculture. And I looked at permaculture, and she told me everything about it. And I said, well, this is funny. It looks like homeopathy on a bigger scale.
Absolutely.
Just like homeopathy for the earth. And so I followed the permaculture track. And I'm now in the place where I can say it's all about homeostasis and balance and self-responsibility, and either we do it or we don't. But if we do it, we might meet miracles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those miracles, open the door to them. They come. I mean, at the moment here, on the community level, since the fires here, a lot of us who live here, eco-immigrants, I call us, because again, you know, we've all fetched up here by coming our own paths to this place, and yet this is the greatest concentration of foreign community in pretty much most of central Portugal. There are a lot of foreigners here, but here we're particularly concentrated. There's about 150 adults, maybe 50 children. And nobody, certainly to begin with, came here kind of deliberately. The place found us.
Wow.
And from that, it's gained a reputation and brought more people in. And now here we are with this accidental community and the need to try and find a way to make a community out of it, and also to integrate to some extent with the people who are already here. And it's a fascinating experiment. But there's a bunch of us who've got together because we're very determined that we have to do something about the environment. The fires were quite some experience and opened our eyes to a lot of things. So we're working together to create an association so it can act as an umbrella organization for any and all regenerative initiatives we come up with. Unfortunately, at this stage in the world, we need this legal entity to access other channels. So, you know, this is the bit that's sort of trudging through treacle. But what I've found with it is like it goes in waves. Most things seem to go in waves. One minute you're surfing and everything's going all right. And then the time has passed, you've got to wait for the next wave, and then up it comes again. And trying to force things through doesn't work. Doesn't work at all.
No. The universe is constituted out of impulse and pause. It's all about rhythm.
Absolutely. So we're proceeding with this slowly but surely, but I'm totally confident that when it all arrives, it will be perfect. And we just need to keep listening. It does take a lot of the stress away when you realize that all you need to do is listen and pay attention. You don't have to figure it out.
This is what we learned when we got into homeopathic treatment, that there was suddenly somebody who did listen.
Yeah.
Who did listen to us as something whole, not just as a cystitis.
Yes. Yes.
Arthritis, not just as a number, but as an individual with a lot of complaints and the past and the future. And took a different approach.
Yes.
And tried to communicate and find a match out of nature, in fact.
Yes.
Find a frequency in nature that tells the same story. And that's so interesting for me. So interesting.
It's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it doesn't even need a remedy, you know. Sometimes it's just a matter of holding up a mirror to the person and something changes inside. I mean, I've coming back to cystitis again. I think I've cured more women from cystitis by asking them what they're pissed off about than I have giving them remedies, you know, because that's what it's saying. It's the language of the body. You're pissed off. And we tend to suppress that. Particularly women tend to suppress that. And that's how it expresses itself. A lot of times. Not always, but a lot of times.
It's absolutely the truth, because this was my situation when I was finishing my vet studies, that I did see that with what I learned and how I was told to treat animals, that never will mean cure. It will mean treatment, but not cure. And I really
Yes.
was pissed off about that. Investing
Yes.
6 years in a medical system that is insufficient.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I never completed my degree either, because it was obvious it wasn't engaging with life. There I was studying living systems through biology and ecology, and life itself was nowhere in anything. It was all about chemical reactions and densities of populations, and I was like, where's the life? Where's the living principle here? What is it that makes the difference between when someone dies peacefully in their sleep? What makes the difference between 1 minute, all those organ systems working away exactly as they should be, and the next minute not? Nothing changes on the physical level, nothing. But everything stops. And that simply is not modeled in our science. It really isn't.
No.
And that was what sent me chasing off in the direction of quantum physics, and that people like Graham Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake, and that has more juice to it. It has much more juice to it.
There is no life without some kind of energy we still did not detect in science.
Yes.
It's the living principle, or what Hahnemann called is the vis vitalis.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And I still think that this kind of power creates serendipity, that this kind of power teaches through life, and that this kind of power gives us the possibility to make a shift.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, it's very much about coming more into the indigenous perspective of how all living systems are interrelated and interconnected. And it's really fortunate that we still have enough of them on the planet to provide that example to us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, where would we be? The crazy thing of what we've done to them over the centuries. We were the ignorant savages, not them. And now we have the opportunity to learn where that knowledge hasn't been lost. And in fact, no knowledge is lost, because once you reconnect, you make that reconnection with the whole of life, then all of a sudden the knowledge is there when you need it. Nothing is ever lost. The trees teach, the plants teach, animals teach, everything.
We just need to see the interconnection.
Yes.
It may be a bit humble, be a bit humble and listen. It's just start listening.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if somebody wants to educate himself and to evolve, to see balance, homeostasis and interconnection, where would you recommend those people to start?
Everyone has their own path. So I would say simply be open to the possibility. Just to be open to the fact that you don't know everything, that you can't control everything, I think most of us are probably aware of that anyway, but that there is information that is coming in all the time. I mean, it is there all the time. I think a lot of the time we make the mistake of thinking it's our own rather than a communication from the system intelligence. Listen, be still and listen. Meditation's a great technique for some, but I mean, you don't have to sit on a cushion. You can be in a meditative state while you're doing the washing up, or sweeping the floor, or weeding the plant beds, anything that opens you up to the possibility that you are part of this big system.
So the first thing is recognizing I'm a part of the system. The second thing is asking the question to the system intelligence, I want to learn, please teach me.
Mm-hmm.
Third thing is getting still. however you do that, but just try to stop the thinking and the too much intaking of noise of anything.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Get still and then listen to what the system intelligence is teaching you, and the system intelligence will find a way to connect to you and will find a way by serendipity to push you on the path you are meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And above all, don't get, I mean, emotion, it's a lovely word, isn't it? Energy in motion, if you like. It's that motion that's causing a lot of the problem. You know, we get pulled in all sorts of directions. We're in fear, we're in love, we're in whatever. Still, to be still is a lot of it. Just to be still.
Don't
and
get
to stay
distracted.
It's interesting. I found myself very much in that state for the last 2 years after the fires.
Mm-hmm.
And even entertained for a while the idea that there was something wrong with me because nobody else appeared to be in that place. Mm-hmm. But as time has gone by, for myself, I know more and more that is the state. Just the stillness, the slight detachment, observe, and use that intelligence, that limited intelligence we have to perceive what's happening.
It's interesting because 2 years ago I came here to Greece after a lot of trouble. Life did lead me to Greece. Mm-hmm. And I found myself sitting on a terrace, looking at the sea, looking at the sunsets over the sea, and I suddenly felt home in a way I never did. Mm. So not speaking the language, so not knowing anybody here, not one single soul, I said, okay, I realized this is home, one way or the other. So now it's my time to connect to it and see what happens next.
Yes, those signals are always there. That reminds me very much of how it is I came here. Because I'd been scouting around for a long time looking for somewhere where I might create a project, to be able to build my own house, to grow my own food, and have somewhere secure for the kids that we could call home, because we were living in rented accommodation at the time. It's never very secure. And it was starting to feel more and more imminent. It was almost like I was walking around with my own personal thundercloud over my head that was about to burst. And we came to Portugal for some friends. We came to volunteer. They just floated the idea one day, hey, let's go and volunteer somewhere and see if this life is all it's cracked up to be. And we were going to be heading for Spain. But nothing we applied to in Spain either got back to us or they didn't have room, and none of it worked. And purely by accident, because Portugal wasn't really on the radar at all 10 years ago. My friends discovered this place in Portugal. And we arrived on a September afternoon, blue skies, still really warm. And we arrived by train. And as we pulled into the station, which was our stop, out of this completely blue sky were these big raindrops. So we rushed off the train and got our stuff into the train station. And the adults went across the square to see if we could find a taxi. And just that short space of time, the heavens opened and this massive summer rainstorm came down. And all the kids were still in the station, so a taxi driver lent me her umbrella so I could get back across the square to them. And the umbrella was a complete waste of time because the rain was bouncing so hard off the ground that I was getting soaked underneath. And in the middle of the square, I went, oh my God, the clouds burst. It's here.
Okay.
And that really, then we went to our hosts and discovered that they ran a property advertising website. So, it's like, so straight away I could start looking for places. And I didn't find it on that trip, but then I went back home and looked online, and I kept getting drawn to this area. Something was pulling me here. And then it was a whole load of other coincidences, just a chain of chance meetings, communications. And boom, I found this place, and came this time with my eldest daughter, who has a knack of seeing through things. That's why I had to take her out of school. She kept seeing through her teachers. And, you know, why did you just say that to that person? You'd let this person do it. And rather than answer her, they'd send her out of class. But anyway, so yeah, she walked onto this land. She pointed to one of the buildings, went, that's mine. Picked up a hoe and started cleaning steps. And I'm going, what are you doing? This is not, you can't do this. And she went, they need cleaned. So I kind of left her to it and went away. And then, I mean, the land was horribly overgrown. I couldn't see all the sense of it. I couldn't even see half of the terraces because they were completely covered in brambles. And I thought, okay, lovely. You know, it has a lot of what I'm looking for, but all the land in these valleys was so beautiful. It was an embarrassment of choice. So I was kind of left flailing a bit. I kind of expected that I would get a strong feeling when I found the land, but that wasn't coming through. And then that night at dinner, I'm sort of humming and hawing about all the places we've seen that day, and my daughter goes, oh, for F's sake, mother. She said, that first place has got your name written all over it, just buy it. So we came back here, and this time I was able to walk around on my own. Previously, I'd been with the people who were showing me the place, so there's that pressure to engage with them rather than with the land. And this time I'm walking around, and I just wanted to get to work. And then the penny dropped. It had exactly the same effect on me as it had on my daughter. It was just a case of work. And that was it, you know, that was it. I knew that was the land. So yeah, that's why I say it found me rather than the other way around.
That's serendipity. And this is only taking place when you're heading in the right direction.
Yes, yes, yes. And funnily enough, everybody, the first wave of people who came to this place, they all had similar stories. I don't know how we would have ended up here otherwise, you know, this isolated little mountain region full of retired folk. Because all the young people of Portugal, it must be the same in Greece, have left and gone to cities or gone abroad.
Absolutely. The village I'm living above the village, in fact. The village I belong to is left about 33 people.
Yeah.
And a lot of houses which are only inhabited in summer. The next, we call it city, but it has only 2,500 people living in there. The next city is away 20 minutes by car. Yeah.
It's similar here. I mean, the county town for this region, this administrative region, is only a tiny town. It's not a city by any stretch of the imagination. And this is a largely mountainous region with tiny little villages, most of whom have only got like half a dozen people living in them, if that. I think at the last census, there was only 11,500 people in the entire area, which is, you know, a handful of smallish towns and 140 villages. Huge area to cover, a huge area to service, and no economy to speak of. So it has its challenges for sure. And I think the population is still falling. After the fires, I had a meeting with the local authority to discuss the idea of creating an eco zone in order for us to start a number of regenerative projects. And the councillor for the environment, the first thing she said to me was, do you know what our biggest fear was after the fires? And I'm thinking of all the logistical challenges they've got. And, you know, she said, no, is that you foreigners would leave. You're the only people who want to live here. Everybody else is still leaving.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But it's interesting too, because although the community is talked about as being a foreign community, we have a lot of Portuguese amongst it, because a lot of Portuguese also are feeling the need to come back to the land. And because they've mostly lived elsewhere and they're foreign to this area, although not to Portugal, they kind of get lumped in with us. And we all think pretty much alike. So we become more of a unit, even though there's, probably as many as a dozen or more nationalities represented here. And it's nice too, because it's a real multicultural community. There is really no one culture that dominates. To begin with, I think they were slightly more British, but now it's very much, if you count the Dutch and the Flemish-speaking Belgians together, then they are in the majority. But it's only a very narrow majority. You know, we have a big community of Portuguese, of British, of Dutch, of Belgians, and all other nations around Europe as well. And South America, the States, Canada. It's a mixture.
This is still missing here. There are only a few Germans here, and mostly old people like me, retired people who just want to live here and live on their pension and don't act much politically, or they just want to have a happy end of life, and that's it. So
we have folk like that too, but yeah,
it's not so much about community, but I hope that there's a shift in the younger Greek generation, because they need to see, and they are seeing, that this is not the way they can go on living.
Yeah.
But of course, here the problem is that they are not very good educated on ecological principles. They're still spraying glyphosate and things like that.
Yeah, same here. Yes, and I mean, all of that is relatively recent, because up until a century ago, as recently as that, the villages in these mountains barely even interacted with the moneyed economy. They didn't need to. They bartered for salt and dried fish and other things that they needed, but mostly they were self-sufficient. Every village had its own tailor, cobbler, carpenter, metalworker. And these people are still alive. I mean, they may be in their 80s now, but, you know, conversations are still possible. The old ways are there. You don't have to scratch very far below the surface. And that must be the case in Greece too, because I mean, certainly I went to Greece when I was in my early 20s, and there were villages living very much like that I visited in some of the less visited parts.
Yeah. It needs a bit more people than 30 to cover the topics, but mostly the Greek people survived all the wars and all the bad situations because of that structure. Yeah.
And same here, I think, too, because the Portuguese economy has never kept pace with the north of Europe. Well, none of southern Europe has it? I mean, it's the same for Italy and Spain to a large extent.
It's another way of life.
Yes.
Here the people work, but thinking back of the times we used to do it and we were allowed to do it, drinking a coffee with somebody was more important than work and gain more money.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Just have a little conversation and ask, how are you, and how are the children, and everything is fine.
Yes. I mean, the village cafes here are still the center of the community. Everyone goes after lunch to take a coffee, and again in the evening after dinner. And it's where all the business of the village is done, just over conversation. They all laugh at us with our meetings and things like that. You know, it's like, what are you up to? Yeah.
Because they just do it here, but it's all closed now. Nobody is allowed to go there, and that's a pity, because there really is a lack of communication now. And I hope that we get back that quite soon. I really hope. But the
I
Greece
think so.
government
I mean,
are even more controlling than the other ones.
I mean, I see it, you know, again, if we step outside of the sort of realm of government and control, what is this doing? I think, you know, it's breaking up all the connections that we had in our society prior. And those connections need to be broken in order for them to reform in other ways. You've got to break something apart before you can put it back together. So even though you have to break everything apart to do that, what's worth keeping, I think, will come back together quite quickly. I hope so.
Me too. So what is your recommendation for our listeners?
I think back to what I said before, to be calm, to try and remain in that place of inner peace, to take a little bit of detachment, which is what we're being forced to do. Literally, we are detached from each other by these lockdowns and this isolation. But to take that detachment as a gift and use it to observe and remain in that place of inner calm. Because the minute we start allowing ourselves to be pulled this way and that, by this theory, that theory, we're sucked in by it. And we lose the ability to keep our feet on the ground. Walking barefoot on the earth is another good one, yes. So the inner calm, the walking barefoot on the earth, get your hands into the soil. And that's a fantastic remedy even for when any panic might arise. Just go and let it happen. Get your hands in the soil, get your feet on the ground, and all of a sudden it will go. Breathe, you know, get out into nature as much as possible. For people in cities, I think this must be so hard.
It is.
You know, it's very easy for us where we are respectively to maintain that calm because we're not caught up in the middle of it. I mean, for me, life hasn't really changed much at all. I just go shopping less often and I don't see my friends as often. But apart from that, it's not so very different. Well, the income thing, but we've all got to struggle with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, try and get into nature. Try and make that connection with nature. Because the earth is just waiting to welcome us back into its arms, you know? That's what it wants more than anything.
I guess so. It's about Mother Earth welcoming her children back. We just have to go.
Yeah. And then, you know, once we are acting as servants of that system intelligence, if you like, that's when we gain the power to overcome those who hold superficial control. And to break this system apart. And it isn't going to be easy. And in some places, it's going to get nasty and messy. But only when we have the strength of the earth behind us, can we overcome. And we don't have to work it out. We don't have to be the ones to design it and control it. We just need to do what we're told.
Get back to service. Interestingly enough, this is what the Australian grandmothers say. The Australian grandmothers say, it's no problem. We have your back. You just need to go. You just have to trust. It's going to be a major shift. It's not going to be what it has been. But it will be better.
Yes, I think the same message is coming out of the indigenous peoples of the Andes. And more and more I see that message coming and I think, yes.
So again, it's all about trust in this system intelligence, as you called it.
Yeah.
I call this the vis vitalis, the Lebenskraft.
Yes.
We mean the same thing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can call it God if you want, or Allah. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
it's
matter.
The same thing.
It's the same thing. All the old men and women know that.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that trust is the only possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we have to find our place, to be on the right spot to serve.
Yes.
To serve and to pull this paradigm shift through. We all know that the systems will collapse and it will be, as you said, nasty and messy.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have a bit of own land where we can grow our things, it might be going back to simple life, but we will survive. That is not the problem.
Yes.
And we will have, just to talk in a Greek way, see how beautiful things collapse.
Yes. Yes. I mean, this is the thing that gets through to me through all of what we're going through. This is a beautiful spring. Absolutely beautiful. And somehow it just seems that, you know, that there's more plants, there's more animals, there's more insects. And it's like, where were you guys hiding the last few years, you know? Yeah, nature's got a lot up her sleeve, I think. I think they've all just been hiding from us. But yes, the possibilities of regeneration are enormous, enormous. But it's where you put your trust. And the only place for me is in that higher order intelligence, because we are stupid. We're too small. We can't have the capacity to know these things or to understand these things. But we need to know what we can trust.
And to state it, we don't have to know how to solve the problems. Mm-hmm. We will be helped by that higher principle. We only have to sit at the table and communicate and act, just as you did with your team forming that homeopathic school. It will work, and suddenly you will find that the right people meet and that you already have all the knowledge and all the possibilities. It just has to come together.
Yes, yes.
And I think in any community, we will experience the same thing, that it is already there. We just didn't look at it. We just did not communicate.
Yes.
We can form teams and we can build things up the better way so that it suits everybody, that it suits life, the purpose of life, and that we all can thrive again instead of decay.
Yes. Yes, it's all hiding in plain sight and has been for a time. You know, it's our own blinkers that prevent us from seeing it.
One last message to the folks.
Be well. Be well. That's all I can say, really. It's trying to think of all the different people who might be watching in so many different circumstances, and some in far more pain than others. Be well. There is a place where you can find peace.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking time to talk to us. I appreciate it very much. It was one of the most amazing interviews to me.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I really enjoyed talking. We should keep in touch.
We will keep in touch, and I really invite you to a matinee, to a Sunday matinee, where we do interdisciplinary talks, and we should get some of the old women together and just have
Yes, the grandmothers, for sure.
Okay, Wendy.
Cool. Okay.
Have a good time.
Ciao, ciao.